Welcome on in, guys. Three bold takes, and we begin our off-season work here at the channel and the show. And what we kind of want to do is we want to discuss the most disappointing teams of 2023. Right? We've got five. You see them on the graphic above our heads. We each picked one, and then we have two that we came to a collective agreement on. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to split it up. First off, I want Quinn to go first to explain his team, and then Chase will go, and then I'll go, and then we'll just have a group discussion about the last two. So go ahead, Quinn, with yours.
Yeah, my most disappointing team of the 2023 season is the LSU Tigers. And it's not as much for their final record because when it came to our preseason predictions, I had them finishing third in the West behind Alabama and Ole Miss. And that's exactly where they finished. I thought there'd be a small step back. The reason I put them on here is how they got there. Because you go back and you watch the full season, you squandered what's in my opinion the best offense LSU has ever had since I've been watching football, and you squandered it with what is probably the worst defense LSU's ever had. And so the reason I put them on the most disappointing list is not as much because of where I had them preseason, but where I look back on the season and look at where they could have actually been if they had put even a halfway decent defense on the field out in Baton Rouge. And it makes me start to wonder. You watch Brian Kelly, and I know they won the West his first year, and they did it with a great win down in Baton Rouge over Alabama in OT to sneak out the West. But it makes me start to wonder. You see, the defense is slowly slipping one year after another, and I'm not gonna like ring the alarm bells yet. Like, oh no, it's time to panic on Brian Kelly. We're only in year two, and you have an SEC West title already. Like, that's still really good. That won't be a thing anymore. Now you got to be a top two team in the conference. And oh, by the way, the conference is just getting harder. I'd say Tennessee's on your level. I'd say Oklahoma's on your level. Ole Miss might be ahead of your level. And you're clearly behind Texas, Alabama, and Georgia right now. And so, and then not to mention the rest of the conference is always up and down on who's good and bad year to year. It's we'll see. I'm starting to get a little worried though with what I saw out of the Tigers this year, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Um, for me, I brought Oregon to the most disappointing of our teams, and some of you guys might look at me, but Chase, they just won an NY6 bowl. They're 12-2. That's great. Oregon at the beginning of the season had championship aspirations, and honestly, the only person that they were supposed to have to beat out was USC. And Washington comes out of nowhere. They not only beat you once, but they beat you twice. I think that's a huge look at. The first time it was more on landing than it was a team, but the second time it was a team. I think you have for a second year coach in Dan Lanning, you have a veteran cast of characters on your team. You got Bo Nix, who's a fifth year, right? Not 6 year, fifth. I think fifth. We're gonna go with fifth. That's what we're gonna roll with. But a guy that's been around the block a few times, he knows how to play, he knows how to compete, and you have a high flying offense, one of the best defenses from an eye test view in the Pac-12, and you can't beat Washington either time that you play them, even on a neutral site field, and you can't make the playoffs. I think this is probably Oregon's easiest path to the playoffs, was beating Washington and getting there this year. That's why they're the most disappointing, because you're like, well, Chase, Oregon, they still did good. They did. But next year gets even harder, just like Quinn mentioned with the SEC. They're going to the Big Ten with their friend Washington there. Then you're going to also have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and then also, I believe the conferences there are also going to dissolve as well. So that's going to be even a bigger problem for Oregon if they pull a tough slate of Michigan and Ohio State and maybe even Washington, or regardless of whoever else out of conference schedule. So I think this was the year Oregon had a really good shot at winning that. They had a really good defense that I love to watch throughout the season, really good secondary and middle of the field guys. And then the offense was absolutely electric. And yes, they won the NY6 Bowl. They played against Liberty. Liberty was the 133rd out of 133 teams on strength of schedule. They didn't deserve to really be there, so it wasn't going to be a big fight. So having this cast of characters on your team, this crew, and not getting to the playoffs was very underwhelming for Dan Lanning and his team. Now you have to start over. Does Dylan Gabriel do it for you next year? Does the Dante Moore do it for you next year? Who knows? And definitely the Big Ten is only going to get tougher. Fred?
Yeah, that both of those I don't necessarily disagree with. I think they both had aspirations that were not met. And I think that's part of being disappointing is you have a certain expectation and you don't meet it, right? Um Next is my team, and that team is the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, Quinn, I know you disagree here, right? And I know that I was a Colorado hater for the majority of the year, but I want to talk more about um, the back half of the schedule and what's ensued after the season or during the season, right? Start off 3-0. You beat TCU 45-42 at TCU. Everybody knows TCU at that point just played for a national championship. They got steamrolled in that game, but they were there. They came in ranked 17th. Turns out they weren't the 17th best team. Turns out they weren't any good, period. So you beat them by 3 on the road. Then you play a Nebraska team that, honestly, that was a great game to watch. I thought Colorado probably played their best football game of the year against Nebraska. I thought that was a fantastic game at home. And then you also have, the Colorado State game. Colorado State was horrible. You beat them in double overtime. Then you get mollywopped by Oregon, which is no surprise. Then you lose by 7 to USC, which at the time USC was top 10. We obviously now know they're an 8-5 team. Also on this list. So take that for what it's worth. Then you beat an Arizona State team that's not really that great. They've had some improvements over the course of a couple years, but they're still not where Arizona is in their own state. Then you start a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game losing streak here at a point where you lose to Stanford. All right, now you could lose to any other team in the Pac-12 besides Stanford this year, and you would get a pass from me. That's horrible. Yes, it was in double overtime, but that's horrible. Then UCLA, you lose by 12. Oregon State, they were pretty good. Then you lose by 3 to Arizona. You get mollywopped by Washington State, and then obviously you finish the season losing by 6 to Utah. That was a lot to go through of an up and down season for Colorado. I don't know if you guys remember, but they were actually ranked 16th at one point in the year. 16th in the country. That was after week 3 against Colorado. They were ranked 16th against Oregon, but were still a 20 some odd point underdog. Make it make sense. So I want to talk about their 4-8 season. Yes, right? I think the Vegas over under was 3.5. So then technically they did do a little bit better than what Vegas thought. But I'm not Vegas. Fans aren't Vegas, right? A lot of people disagree with Vegas all the time. And people thought that this team was at least a 6-win team. Chase, you said a 6-win team. They didn't get
5
there.
to 8. 5 to
5 and
8.
5 to
5
8.
to 8 win.
That's where I was too. So.
They still underachieved that, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to say, they still underachieved that. Also, this is my biggest point here, and we have 2 more teams and we're kind of running out of time here. This is my biggest point. The recruiting for Colorado has taken a huge hit over the past month and a half of the season. And that to me is concerning when it comes to Deion Sanders and the future of Colorado. Now they're going to the Big 12, right? It's going to be, I think, more competitive for the level of play that Colorado's at. There's a lot more teams that's Colorado's, I guess where they're at program wise, it's going to be good to watch. But they have got to step up in recruiting. And Deion, I don't think he's a football coach. I think he is a team dad. And the transfer portal's not really turned out to what he wanted it to be for upcoming next year. Recruiting's not there. So overall, I think they started up here, went 3 games, ranked 16th, looking to have a good recruiting class, looking to have a good transfer portal class, and then all of a sudden it just all went downhill. And that's the issue for me. That's the reason why they're disappointing.
But before we move on, I gotta add as well. I was really expecting them to have a good season, a 5 to 8 win season, like I mentioned. But I think you saw in the middle of the season what kind of rubbed me wrong with Dion and Colorado was after the USC loss, you bounce back, win against Arizona State. But then losing to Stanford, I think you saw the culture shift and a lot of just ugliness come out of that culture, just more about me than it is about the team itself. I think that's where you lost the season. Because some of these games, the Stanford game, the Arizona game, the Utah game, a one-score game, you can win those games and have a six-win season, 6-6, going bowling. But the culture started to show, and the foundation wasn't built correctly in Dion's first year. Hopefully, he can turn that around second year. Freddie?
Yeah, so the next team obviously is another Pac-12 team here. Three of these teams are on the Pac-12. We did not do that on purpose. Well, they were in the Pac-12. USC, right? They finished the year 8-5. I had them making the playoffs preseason. To me, they are probably the most disappointing team of 2023 coming into the year. I don't know if what you guys think about that, but 8-5. I mean, it's Chase or Quinn. You go right ahead. It looks like you want to say something.
I just think, 8-5, yeah, that's disappointing. As far as them not making or winning the Pac-12, I'm not shocked. Like I still think they definitely need to be on this list. That's why they're part of our cumulative team. You're talking about a team that people had playoff, like legit playoff aspirations for, that fell drastically short of that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the same things that have been the crux of Lincoln Riley teams for years, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse every year. And I just don't know if it'll actually change. I'm starting to give up hope altogether.
I think Lincoln Riley was a terrible choice to pick him up. He was a hot shot, young-ish coach, but I think when you pick him up, you're expecting your offense to be elite and a mediocre to decent defense. You got one of the worst defenses in all of college football last year, and having that in the Pac-12 with a good offense is usually okay, but just not finishing out the correct way. You have a guy that's supposedly the number one pick in the draft, and you can't get past a 10-win season, can't go to the Pac-12 championship. It's just very sad. That's why I had USC here. I'm a huge hater of USC. I'm a huge hater of Lincoln Riley. I think both of them are disappointing as a whole. I think USC lives off of a brand that hasn't been there since the early 2000s. And I love to spit on their name when I can because every single year ESPN loves to have them in the top 10, top 15, saying USC is going to do this, USC is going to do it. They're not. They're not a good team. And they're going to find out next year if Lincoln Riley can't win more than 10 games and be in the Pac 12, that they're really going to be hurting here soon. Well, not Pac 12. My bad. I forget where they're going. Are they going to the Big Ten? Whatever. That if they can't win, they made a huge, terrible choice to hire Lincoln Riley because I don't think they're going to be relevant as in a playoff team under his tenure.
And finally, I think one of the more universal teams that is just disappointing the past 2 years, but we're going to throw them on this list again, is Clemson, right? 9-4 overall. However, they did string together 5 straight wins to end the year. So that means they were 4-4 at one point. At that point in time, there were people calling for Dabo to step down, for him to be fired. Chase, you as well. But then they go on a run to beat Notre Dame. They beat Georgia Tech. They beat your Tar Heels. Chase. They beat South Carolina, and then they finished off a bowl win, the Gator Bowl against Kentucky. But we don't want to look past the fact they got mollywopped by Duke in week 1. And then had 2 straight losses in the middle of the year between Miami and NC State. So, Chase, I want to pass this one off to you first
Thank you.
on Clemson and your thoughts on their disappointing season of 2023.
Thank you. I'm actually kind of glad I'm getting to go first. Look, I did call for Dabo to get fired during the middle season. Well, not fired, but maybe he's not the guy for the future. You watch them beat Kentucky by 3, a 7-5, 7-6, whatever team in the SEC. Yes, they beat Louisville to end the season, whatever. We saw what Louisville could do against Florida State. The way Dabo Sweeney celebrated that bowl game win is reminiscent of how he used to celebrate the national championships he'd win. And that just explains the culture shift at Clemson. They're not a championship winning team anymore. And I think they ended up having a good season definitely after we kind of gave them some crap. Hey, maybe this isn't going the right way. They rattled off 4 wins, but to say against the South Carolina, a UNC, and a Georgia Tech team that were all mediocre teams, if not terrible teams like South Carolina, then I don't know. I'm not. I think Clemson, we're putting them on this list because looking back, that is a national championship winning team and coach. And ever since he's lost Venables and his OC, which I forget at the moment, Dabo Sweeney has not been the elite coach that he used to be. Simple as that. Quinn?
Well, I'll start with this. They're on the list because they are a team that was on the verge of dynasty. I mean, a dynasty's to me, it's not 3 and 4; it's 3 and 5 years, and they captured 2 in 3. And if they beat LSU in that one title game, that's boom, 3 and 4. So that's how close they were to accomplishing what's honestly the hardest thing to accomplish in all of college football. Very few programs have ever done it, and now we're watching them at the end of that. That's why they're on this list. But as far as the celebrating the bowl game thing, I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the culture at Davos that Dabo has in Clemson. Like, yes, it is a sign as to why I think that their championship days are done, but I don't think it's because what made them successful is gone. I think it's because what made them successful isn't relevant in college football anymore. Like, he celebrated that Gator Bowl win because that's his players that signed to his team and put their heart into Clemson, finishing off their season the right way by winning their bowl game. And he's going to celebrate that no matter which bowl game it is. Like, that's my understanding of Dabo Sweeney and Clemson. But his inability to be willing to utilize the transfer portal to its fullest extent at a program who honestly could abuse it if they wanted to because of brand recognition over the past few years, I think will ultimately be their undoing, especially in a conference with Florida State, assumably, uh, that uses it super well, and Miami, who will start utilizing it super well not too far from now. Throw into the fact that you being an ACC school, you play against SEC teams all the time. And I promise you, every single one of them is utilizing NIL and transfer portal to its fullest extent. I think that is really the reason they're on this list and will continue. I honestly, I don't think they'll be on this list next year because my expectations of Clemson have completely changed. Like, if they win an ACC title going forward, that's something I think is still in their realm of possibility. But winning the Natty, that would be a shock to me going forward.
Wow, yeah, Chase, I completely disagree on your take about celebrating a bowl win. I mean, that's a bowl win, right? Now it may not be the bowl that you wanted to be in, but when they were 4-4, they didn't think they would make a bowl game. And here they are, rattled off 5 straight wins, including the bowl game. And so for him, I think it was a sigh of relief, right? Like, we were able to bring this team back together from all the crap that had been said about them, from getting destroyed by Duke, went losing 2 games in a row in the middle of the year. To be able to come back together and play winning football, I think was a sigh of relief and something to celebrate. Um, Now, Quinn, I don't think that Clemson's championship window is over. With the 12-team playoff, um, I think there's a real shot that we could see Clemson win another national championship in the next 5 years. Now, that's assuming, hear me out, that's assuming that some of these rules and regulations between the transfer portal NIL start to be reined in a little bit. And I think that will benefit Dabo tremendously and hurt others in the sport that like to abuse it and get better that way if there start to become legislation. Uh, Dabo's a great recruiter. And if college football finds itself back in a sense of where college football or where recruiting is still king, which I still think it is. But if that's your main source of players, I think you see Clemson come back in there at least once over the next 5 years. Now, will they make it to 3 national championships, win 2? No. No. That part is gone. That dynasty part is gone. And you could say the same for Alabama. In that dynasty aspect too. So we're not just hating on Clemson, who had an amazing run during the playoff era. Um, but yeah, I think you do see Clemson return to glory at least once in the next 5 years, simply because of the legislations in college football. But this year, very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. But great way to end the season for Clemson and kind of propel you into 2024 and beyond, in my opinion. So that's been our 5 most disappointing teams in all of college football this year. Leave us a comment down below. Who do you agree with? Who would you add to the list? Do you hate our list? Do you like it? Let us know. Subscribe. Consider sticking around. We post college football content year round. So get ready for a lot of off-season videos. It's been 3 bold takes. Peace.